Alright guys, now let's implement authentication using Google as well as email and password in Firebase. Now first of all we need to open our Firebase. So in here I'm going to open Firebase. Okay. And we need to open our previous application, which is this one, Firebase block. Okay. And in here we need to set up our authentication. So I'm going to click this authentication here. As you can see, you need to click this get started, and inside here you need to choose all the platforms that you want to add for your authentication. So I'm going to change this email and password. You need to enable this. Okay. And you need to enable this also. Just save it. Okay. And also we can add a new provider, which is Google, and we need to enable this one. And in here we need to add our email address. I'm going to add this email address, and as you can see, our authentication is ready. Now let's make it work inside this front end. So at first I'm going to add this sign in with Google, and then sign in with this email and password. Okay. And using this one we are going to work on sign up. Now let's work on sign in with Google, but before that we need to have a context API, because we are going to use this auth variable in multiple components inside our application. So for that it's more easy to have a context API. So in here I'm going to add a new folder called context and a new file called context.jsx. Okay. Now in here we need to create a new context. I'm going to call that block context, which is equal to create context. Okay. Now we have created our context. Now we need to get the children in here. So because we are going to wrap our application with this component, it should be children, and we need to render the children in here. Okay. Now we need to wrap our children with this create context, but this should be a capital letter because it will look like a component. I'm going to write it here, dot provider. Okay, now we need to have a function so we can import any value from our context API at any component that we need. So in here I'm going to export a new variable, and I'm going to call that block, which is equal to this arrow function. We need to write use context and add this block context inside of it. Now we need to wrap our application because we got the children here. So I'm going to open this main.jsx, and in here I'm going to wrap this app with context. Okay. As you can see, our application has no error. Now to pass this use state hook, we need to copy them and write here value, and inside this double braces you can add any values that you want to pass to our context API. Now instead of this temporary variable in here, I'm going to get this from our context API file. So I'm going to get this from this block function that we just added. Okay. As you can see, our application is working perfectly without any error. Okay, we just add this context API. We need to push this code in here. So I'm going to state all, and for the commit matches I'm going to write here. Okay. Now let's work on signing in with Google. So inside this Firebase, as you can see, we have a Firebase file in here. I have already imported this provider, so we are going to get this inside our component. I'm going to open this demo auth and auth here. I'm going to close this file share. Now in here I'm going to have a new function which is equal to this arrow function. It should be asynchronous function. Okay, and inside here I'm going to have a try and catch block. Now I'm going to write here const create user, which is equal to await. Now we need to import a new function which is called sign in with pop up, okay, and it is coming from Firebase. Now inside here we need to add our auth, which we have just added here, which is this one. So we need to import it. So the first one is going to be auth, make sure to import it, and the second one is going to be provider, which we have added inside this Firebase file also, which is this one, okay. So we have created the user. This create user variable is an object. Now we need to take out the user from this object. So I just write here new user is equal to create user dot user. We have created our user, but to make our profile inside this application, we need to store the user's data inside the database. So for that, we need to first have a reference. I'm going to make a new variable here called reference, and we need to import this doc function from Firebase file store. It's coming from the database, okay. And inside here at first we need to import our DB again from Firebase file, which is this one, and following that we need to have a collection name. I'm going to name these users, and also we need to add the user ID, new user dot uid, okay. So this is the reference of our document. Now we need to add that inside our database. So in here I'm going to write user doc, which is equal to await get doc, and we need to pass this ref inside, okay. Now we need to check if this user exists inside our database, then we just ignore adding this user to avoid duplication. Otherwise we add this inside our database. So in here I'm going to say if there is no user doc that exists, if the user is not exist inside the database, then we are going to add that. So I'm going to write await satck, and at first we need to have our ref, make sure to import this satck, and following that we just add our user data. So at first we need to have the user ID. The user ID is going to be new user dot uid, okay, and we need to get a username. Username is going to be new user dot display name, okay, and also we need to get the user's email. It's gonna be email, and we need to add a user image. So in this case it should be photo URL, and finally we need to have a bio. So the bio is going to be this empty string for now. So this data are coming from the email of the user. Now we need to install a new library to show our notification. So in here I'm going to look for React Testify notification, okay. As you can see, I can install that using this command. I'm going to open the terminal and just add it. So once the user is logged in, we want to push him to the home page. So in here I'm going to import navigate, which is equal to use navigate, okay, and we have installed this. Now first of all we navigate the user to the home page, and also we send a notification message to, which is coming from the React Testify .success, the type of message is gonna be successful, and we just write here user has been signed in. Okay, you can make it capitalized. Okay, now we got an error. The error is because in here this app should be with a small letter, so we need to change this. Okay, as you can see, the error is gone. The next thing which we need to add is closing this model. So we just set this model to be back to false. Okay, and for this error message, I'm going to copy this and paste it here, but this should be error, and the message is going to be error.message. Alright, now let's add this function inside this button here. As you can see, we have a button sign in with Google. If you remember, we need to pass this click, which is equal to this function. Okay, so now before we sign in, we need to set up our database, because we need to add the user's data inside our database. So I'm going to open this Firestore database. Okay, and we need to create a new database in here. For now, we can keep it in the default setting. It's gonna be just test for now. We are going to change the security rules later on, so don't worry, just enable it. Okay, alright, our database has been created, and now we are ready to sign in. So from here, if I open here and try to click this, as you can see, we are going to have this pop-up. This pop-up is this one, which is sign in with pop-up. Okay, and in here I can choose this account. As you can see, the user has been successfully signed in because the model is closed, as we ask it to close the model here. Now let's check whether we have a user data inside our Firebase or not. So in here, as you can see, this is the user data. So later on, based on this data, we are gonna make our profile. Okay, and the reason we are not navigated to the main page and don't see this notification text is because we haven't get the logged in user's data. So inside the context API, we need to get the user data and store it inside the current user state hook. To get the user data, we need to define a useEffect hook. Now we need to have a variable and import on or state change from the Firebase /auth. The first argument is going to be auth, and following that we need to have a callback function. We are going to get the user, and in here we need to check if we have a user, or if any user is logged in, then we are going to set the current user to be user. Okay, otherwise else we are gonna set the current user to be null. Okay, and we need to unsubscribe to it. We can write return arrow function and unsubscribe. Alright, now we need to pass this current user. Alright, now let's check it. As you can see, we are pushed to the main page because we have a user, and our application has pushed us directly to the main page. But as you can see, if I refresh the page, we can see this demo for a while, because it will take a little time for the user to be fetched from the backend. So to solve that problem, we can have a loading here. I'm going to write here loading, set loading, which is equal to user state, and it's gonna be false by default. So before the user starts fetching, we are going to set the loading to be true, and when the user is generated, then we are gonna set the loading to be false. Okay, now in here we need to set a condition inside the children. I'm going to say if there is loading, then we are going to print this loading component. otherwise we want to print the children. Now let's have this loading component. So inside this component, I'm going to have a new folder called loading and a new file inside of it, loading.jsx. I'm going to write this. Okay. Now let's import this component here. Okay. Now let's style our loading. For this div, we are going to have a class name of fixed and set 0 to take the entire page. We need to add grade plus item center. Background color should be white and z index is going to be 30. Now inside this div, we are going to have an image. So the image source is going to be loading to.gif and alt is going to be loading. Okay, so this image is coming from this public folder. I have added this and you can download the GIF from the Google. Now let's check it. As you can see, if I refresh the page, we will have this loading here. You can still see that header for a while. So to avoid that problem, I just want to change this to be true and I'm gonna get rid of this one here. Okay, now if I refresh the page, as you can see, we don't see that anymore. Alright, now let's push this code. We need to state all the changes here. Okay, we are done with this Google sign-in. Now let's work on how you can sign in and sign up using email and password. So now we need to log out first. So I need to open this application in here. As you can see, we have IndexedDB and open this one. We need to clear it and also this one. Okay, now let's open the model again and at first let's make a new account. As you can see, we have 4 inputs here. So in here, I'm going to close this one and let's open the sign up component. Now let's have our useState hook first. So in here, I'm going to call that form, set form, which is equal to useState hook. And inside here, we need to have an object. So we are going to have the username, which is empty string. Okay, now let's get the inputs value using the useState hook. Now I'm going to send the set form and form to each reusable component. I'm gonna copy and paste them for other components. Now inside this reusable input component, we are going to receive them here, but it should be without this curly braces. Okay, and first of all, we need to have an onChange here. OnChange is equal to handle change. It's gonna be a function, so I'm going to call that handle change, which is equal to this arrow function. And in here we need to set the form. Now we need to get each input's value based on their name. So in here we need to first spread this form, and now based on, let's get this event here, e.target.name, we are going to get the value e.target.value. Okay, and that's it. Now in here I can make a new function and call that handle submit. We are going to get this event again, and we are going to just prevent the default here. Okay, and now let's console log this form here. I can pass this handle submit to this form. On submit is equal to this function. Okay, now let's check it. Now I'm going to inspect the browser and check this console. Okay, open the sign up. Now if I click this sign up, as you can see, we could successfully get all the inputs value. Okay, we got the value, and it's time to make the sign up operation and save the user's data inside our database, inside this Firestore database. Okay, at first we need to add some input validations. So if the user clicked this button but he hasn't typed any data inside our inputs, we wanna return an error message. So in here I'm going to set a condition if all the inputs which are username are empty. We can just write here equal to empty string. Then we just send an error message using this toast notification dot error. And actually I forget to add this toast component, so I'm going to open this again, and we need to get this component here. I'm gonna copy this and I'm going to add this inside this app.jsx. So down this one, and also it has a CSS link. I'm going to copy this and add this inside this main.jsx. Now let's check it. I'm going to open this and this one. Now we don't have any value inside our inputs. If I click this one, you can see we have this error message here. Okay, now let's keep up. I'm going to close this one and this one. Now we need to check if this confirm password is not matching with this password. We are going to send another error message. So I'm going to say else if. Then again we are going to send this error message, and we just say here, we just simply return this. Okay, now let's say I have filled this one and this one at gmail.com, but I type a password which are not matching. Now if I click this sign up, you can see we get an error message saying your passwords are not matching. Okay, otherwise we are going to just let the user to sign up. So in here I'm going to write a new variable. We need to get the user, which is equal to await, and this function should be asynchronous function, create user with email and password. Inside this parentheses we need to pass the auth, which is coming from Firebase file, and also we need to send our email and password to this one. So I'm going to write here form.email and form.password. Okay, and that's it. This is how you can sign up using email and password. Now once the user is logged in, then we are going to save its data in the local storage like before. So I don't want to waste time. I'm going to copy this from here, okay, and paste it down here. Now we need to change this one. It's gonna be user.uid, which is this one. Okay, and for the username we are going to send the form.username. It's not display name but username. For the email it's gonna be form.email, and also our form do not have any photos, so we are going to keep this empty string. So later on we can add that from our profile. Okay, now let's add our navigate here. So up here I'm going to write navigate, which is equal to use navigate. Okay, we have an error because we need to add another braces to close this one, which is here. All right, and now we need to get this set model. So I'm going to receive this in here, and inside this auth component we need to send this inside our sign up component. So as you can see we have this sign up component, and we can send this to our sign in component also. Okay, now we have added them, but we need to import them one by one. So I'm going to import this doc, and also this is not new user.uid, it should be user.uid. Okay, Now I think we are ready. Now let's test whether we can sign up or not. So I'm going to open this model here. Okay, I should sign up here. I'm going to add a username here. So if I click this button here, as you can see, we could successfully sign up, and you can see here is my message that user have been signed in. And if I open this one, as you can see, we have a new user inside our database. This is the email, this is the user ID, and we don't have any user image, and this is our username. Okay, alright guys, we could successfully sign up. Now let's work on sign in. So I'm going to inspect again, open this one and just clear this. Now inside here we need to open this sign in using email. As you can see, we have already this email, and we have this email inside this authentication. So from now on we can log in using this email also. So now I'm going to open this sign in component here, and in here I'm going to have another user state hook also, which is called form set form user state hook. And inside this object we need to have an email which is empty by default, and a password which is also empty string by default. Now let's send them to our reusable component here. Now let's make an onSubmit function here. So in here I'm going to say const handle submit is equal to this arrow function. This should be handle submit, and inside here we need to set the prevent default here. Okay, now if I console log this form here again and add this handle submit to this form, on submit, and add this function. Now let's check it. I'm going to inspect the browser and inside this console. Okay, if I add an email here and click this button, you can see we could get the value of these inputs. Now let's sign in. At first we need to validate this input, so I'm going to write here a form which includes email. If they are empty string, then we are going to return a toast notification dot error. Otherwise we are going to have a try and catch block here, and in here I'm going to write a wait. There should be an asynchronous function here, and we need to sign in with email and password. Okay, again we need to send this auth along with this form.email and form.password. Now we need to have a navigate here, so I'm going to get this navigate. Once the user is logged in, we need to navigate him to the main page, and we are going to send a toast notification here. I'm going to copy this. It should be success, and the message is going to be, and we need to have an error message for this catch here. Okay, now let's check it. So in here I'm going to open this one, and if you remember we had an email and the password was this one. Now if I click the sign in here, as you can see we could successfully sign in. But for sign in and sign up I would like to have a loading, so I'm going to add that loading here. So following this I need to have a new user state hook loading, set loading, which is equal to user state hook, and it is false by default. Now in here I'm going to set this loading to be true. Okay, and it should be false when the user is logged in, and also it should be false when we have an error. Okay, Now I'm going to add this loading inside this button. So I'm going to change this double quote to be a temporary string, and in here I'm going to set a condition. If there is loading, then we are going to add an opacity of 50 and pointer event should be none, otherwise it should be this empty string. Okay, now let's add a loading inside our sign up also. So in here I'm going to copy this loading use state hook, and I'm going to add this here. Again, we need to set the loading inside here before the user starts creating, and we are going to set this to be true, and also once the user has been created, we are going to set this to be false. And we are going to add the same effect for this button, for this sign up button. I'm going to copy them from here, and in here I just copy this condition which I just added here, and that's it. Okay, and paste it here, and that's it. We could successfully made the function for the sign in and sign up using email and password. Okay, so again, and try to sign in again. If I click this button, you can see we have that loading for a while, and it will work the same for our sign up. Okay guys, we are done with this part. Now let's push this code. I'm going to state all the changes here, and in here I'm going to write out with email and password is added.